Yellow and Red Mix by Digits 27, Chapter 36. Dear shithead, it's been so long since I've seen you now. I know it's only 10 months, but it feels like years. Call me how mushy does that sound? I miss you. I know I'm not usually good with expressing my emotions, but it feels a bit easier when I write them down. I want to know just how much you've grown, both physically and training wise. But I guess I'll see in a year, won't I? Infiltrating Sasori's organization was a bitch. The man is the most paranoid fucker I have ever met. I even had to cover up my curse mark with makeup so they wouldn't think I had any connections to that pedo. It worked though. I'm in the organization. It was weird at first. For a supposed S rank missing in, the guy was a fucking moron. It only took me 2 months to work my way into his inner circle. I am now one of his truest allies. Tourist elites. I've been training hard as well, enough that the man himself thinks I'm too valuable for simple spy work. I'm currently doing missions for the Katsuki. How weird is that? Don't worry, it's nothing major or even related to their main goals, and I use every opportunity I get to fuck them over without drawing suspicion. I definitely feel like I'm getting stronger. No details yet, just something you'll have to see later. I want to know how you're doing. How you doing? I've decided how you doing. What you've been doing, who you've met. Just a friendly warning, if I come back and you've been with another girl, I'll rip your nuts off. Just for that, though, I decided to give you something so you wouldn't forget me, as if that was possible anyway. I'm not sure how you're going to send me a reply, but you're a resourceful shithead, so I know you'll find a way. Speaking of which, how did you fleck the Falcon? Badass, isn't it? Gar gave me the summoning contract before I left. It took me some getting used to and the boss and the boss summon is a total bitch, but eventually I slapped them around enough to get what I wanted. I hope you're having fun wherever you are and you're staying safe. I want my boyfriend in one fucking piece when I see him next. Sorry about how long I took to send this. When I said Sasori was paranoid, I wasn't fucking kidding. This was the first chance I got on a solo mission. I'm not totally sure how long these stupid things are supposed to be, but I guess this works, so I'll stop. I miss you, Naruto. Can't wait to see you again. Your smoking hot girlfriend, Taiya. A warm smile lit up Naruto's face as he read the message from the girl he loved. It was just so Taiya that it brought back a lot of warm memories. He also laughed a little at what he wrote, what she wrote at the end. If he didn't know any better, she sounded like she was taken after Uncle. Naruto almost shuddered at the thought. Taya was unpredictable enough without throwing the healthy amount of sadism that was Uncle Mitarashi. He thought about what she said. It seemed her mission was going well, which was good. He was worried a lot. He was worried a lot over that, but pointless it seemed. It was also good that she was so easily able to get the Katsuki, or at least Sasori, to trust her. He wondered what type of mission they had her going on. She didn't clarify in the letter, so he was curious. He shrugged, thinking it would just be one of the things he could ask when he sent his reply. He also wondered about that, thinking of just how he could do such a thing. She appeared to have faith in him in that regard. He had a Fujin no Iki seal placed on her, of course, one of the more long-distance ones that would last him the training trip. Even so, he didn't think just flashing in would be a good idea, especially if she was in a compromising situation. He also didn't know where she was. The jump could be rather large. He still didn't fully understand the limitations of his own jutsu and wouldn't risk chakra depletion. However, he might be able to do it for something like a scroll. Just send it along the seal instead of himself. It wouldn't work with his current setup. The entrance seal was on his body and designed for him. He could write out another entrance seal and temporarily connect it to Yuya's using his own as a base template. His mind began whirling through the various ways he would have to modify it before it ground to a halt, realizing he still needed something to send through in the first place. By this point, Fu had snatched the scroll out of her brother's hands in his distracted state. Reading it over thoroughly, Naruto had told her a lot about Taiya, and she was rather excited to get her first glimpse of what the girl was like for herself. She couldn't glean all that much from the letter, but the girl seemed confident and happy when talking about Naruto, and Fu was glad about that. It was important to her that Naruto was happy, and if his girlfriend wasn't good for him, then Fu wouldn't have minded speaking up. Just then, she noticed a small seal at the bottom corner of the scroll that Naruto must have overlooked in his haste. Remember what Naruto had told her about Funjutsu? She channeled chakra in her hand and placed it against the seal. There was a small poof of white smoke that erupted from the seal, which was enough to break Naruto out of his thoughts. He looked over in time to see Fu holding onto a small stack of Polaroids, eyeing them curiously before her eyes went wide. I'll take those, Fu. He quickly snatched the photos out of Fu's hand, looking at her slightly shocked face. When he looked down at the first picture, he realized why, and his eyes widened slightly. Taya was stood in front of the camera in a pose with her hips slightly out to her right, while her left hand was up in a peace sign. Her right hand was clutching her own ass as she bent towards the camera, managing to show off some recently gained cleavage in the tight two-piece red bikini she was wearing. Where did she get the bikini? Wait, who the hell is holding the camera? The thought he thought he was incredibly angry at the thought of somebody else seeing Taya like that when the photos were supposed to be for him. He sheepishly looked over at Fu, who still looked a little shell-shocked, holding her hand out like the photos were still in it. So that was Taya. What do you think? He had tried to make the question sound casual, but failed miserably. Fu just turned to look at him, somewhat recovering after the silence was broken. She seems, really pretty. Naruto smiled at her, wrapping an arm around the young girl's shoulder. She would be really happy to meet you. I bet the two of you would get along great. Fu just nodded meekly, her pre-adolescent mind still confused about what she had seen. Oni-san, why did she send pictures like that? Naruto just chuckled nervously, looking over at Yujito in the doorway of the kitchen. She was now looking at them both strangely, or more precisely, the photos in Naruto's hand. It's a boyfriend-girlfriend thing. You'll understand when you get a little older. Fu pouted cutely at that, wanting to understand now as all children did when confronted with that line. Yujito now seemed even more interested, walking over and attempting to take the photos from Naruto, who skillfully diverted his hand away from her. She tried again, and once again, Naruto moved his hand out of reach. By now, Fu had gotten over her confusion and slightly embarrassment, and was just curious. The two girls suddenly ganged up on him in an attempt to get the photos away from him. That was the scene B walked in on, Naruto standing on his toes with his arm in the air, while Fu on his back and Yujito pressed up against his front, also trying to reach for the photos. B's eyes widened in surprise, his sunglasses nearly falling off his face at the seemingly compromising position. He walked into the room with years' worth of stealth training and quickly grabbed the photos for himself to see what all the fuss was about. His sunglasses actually did fall off his face when he looked at them, revealing a set of deep chocolate eyes. He laughed and gave an appreciated whistle looking at them. Man, little nine, your girlfriend looks mighty fine. Even the killer bee couldn't keep away from such a honey. He punctuated his rap with arm movements that only made Naruto annoyed. The large man had the gall to flip through the photos when Naruto had only seen the first one. He growled in annoyance and snatched the Polaroids back before B could go through it anymore, and hurriedly stuffed them into his jacket pocket. Viewing time's over. Those are supposed to be between me and Tayuya. All three of them caught the irritation in his voice and smiled nervously. Come on, Oni-san, we were just curious. You tell us so much about Tayuya, but we've never actually seen her. Naruto smiled warmly, the irritation melting from his features at his little sister's voice. Don't worry, Fu. Only a year and then you can see her for yourself. The girl smiled a little at that, still upset that Naruto was hiding the pictures from her and wouldn't explain why. She remembered how the girl in the photo had looked wearing the bikini. She did have to admit the girl was beautiful. She looked down at herself, specifically her chest, and wondered why she couldn't look more like that. The other girl actually filled out the bikini she wore, but Fu didn't have anything there. She had once brought the concern up with Yujito, but the older Jinchuriki just told her to wait. Naruto missed her concerned look and made to leave the room. He wanted to write up his reply, worrying about how he would send it later. Before he could, though, he felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see B standing behind him with his arms crossed. Yo, Nine, I ain't got much time, so listen to my rhyme. Brook sent me to tell you that you and little Fu got a skadoo. Naruto just looked at his teacher and friend confusingly, wondering what he meant. The Rokage is kicking me out of Kumo. B quickly shook his head, not very happy that his rhythms weren't clear enough when in his head they made perfect sense. Nah, bro loves you and little Miss Seven. Having you here is like our own slice of heaven. That was exaggerating a bit, but B had trouble with the number 7. You spent too much time here, so now you got to get clear before Akatsuki get near. Ah, yeah. He finished with his arms crossed over his chest, as his head bobbed a little to the beat only he could hear. Naruto just looked downhearted. He realized he would have to leave eventually, but he had genuinely enjoyed his time in Kumo. He had made great friends. He had also reached a new level in his training, but he was promised by B that he would get a few scrolls to further his lightning affinity when he left. How long do we have? B just nodded understandingly, his hand on Naruto's shoulder almost protectively. Bro says you gotta pack up and go before those Biju snatchers get ready to blow. He gave y'all a week until you gotta sneak and make sure your rhymes are freak. Yeah? Naruto nodded by now. B's raps were like second nature to him, and he could understand the man better than most. Thanks, B. It was cool hanging around here for so long. He looked over at Fu with a smile. She also looked sad at their forced departure. I guess it's time we found somewhere new to make friends, Imoto. Time for a new adventure, I guess. The young girl smiled. Naruto had a habit of getting them out of her even when she was sad. What about my Jinchuriki training? Jujutsu had stayed silent until now, but she knew this departure would be hard on Fu. If she was honest, she didn't particularly like it either. The girl had become almost family to her. Don't worry about it, Fu. Naruto's got it down pretty good, and he knows what to do to keep improving. I'm sure he'll help you through the next year. Anyway, when this is all over, me and B will still be here to train you. She said it with a reassuring smile that was more pretense and false bravado than anything. Yujito knew better than most that a shinobi's life was uncertain at the best of times, but she valued Fu's innocence. Fu brightened again at her combined sister, and best friend, and the teacher comforted her. Thanks, Oni-san. She ran over and wrapped Yujito up in a warm hug, which made the little girl blush a little before patting her on the back. Alright, Fu, we still have a few days before you and Naruto leave. We'll just have to make the most of them. Naruto nodded energetically, back to her usual cheerful self as she thought of all the things she still wanted to do with her friends in Kumo. Naruto also smiled at the scene. He was definitely going to miss all of this, especially the friends they both made. Be Yujito, Samui, Omui, Karui, Mabui, and the Arakage. B chose that moment to leave, his message delivered and a large pile of food waiting for him back home. Yujito retired back into the kitchen to finish off what she was cooking while Fu flopped down on the couch, taking in everything again. Naruto slipped out of the room silently, moving towards his bedroom so he could write up a reply to the Yuya's letter that had caused so much havoc. He walked in and set down a fresh scroll on his desk. Plenty were lying around from his Fujitsu studies. He grabbed an ink brush, set a smirk on his face, and went about writing back. Toya swung lazily in the hammock she had strung up between two pillars in the small room she had been given. She was smiling, just thinking about various things with her hands back under her head and her long red hair strewn across her eyes. An observant ninja might just spot her ears twitching every now and then as she listened out for early warnings of her soon-to-be arrival. Sasori had sent her to this bunker to meet up with some informant or another. He always sent her because he was too paranoid to go himself. Toya didn't mind all that much. The bunkers were always nice and quiet, and she could think clearly about things here that she couldn't win around her boss. She may have despised Sasori in so many ways ever since they had first been introduced by one of his higher subordinates, but that didn't stop the girl from admiring him somewhat. He ran a tight organization, herself not included, that ran like clockwork. He had a steady stream of informants bringing him information from across the nations, where it would filter back up the ranks to him. The same could not be said for his moron of a partner. When Taiya was around, the two were always bickering like children. It would be over soon, it would be over some inane topic, like whose art was better or why they were given the task of searching Jinchuriki. That was another reason Taiya despised Deidara. He was assigned to the Ichibi, Gaara, and she would make sure that would never happen. She would rip off his creepy-ass mouth hands before they could even gasp in surprise. The first time they had met the man, tried to offer her a small sculpture of herself made out of his patented clay. While she admitted it was a good likeness, she still didn't want to touch it, knowing that the clay came out of mouths in his hands. And sure enough, when she did touch it, it was slightly damp, and she immediately dropped it. That forced everyone to dive out of the way as a small statue exploded on contact with the ground. Yep, she hated him all right. That wasn't to say it was all bad. For a lot of the time, Taiyo was essentially left to her own devices, with some of Sasori's other subordinates not too far away, unless of course she was specifically set a task or mission were like she was currently. She huffed in annoyance. The informant was supposed to be here already, and the generally damp of the bunker was getting on her nerves. She stood to stretch her neck a little, but as she did so, she felt her hip warm up suddenly. It felt tingly like whenever Naruto would use the Fujin no Iki on her. To her surprise, a scroll suddenly just popped into existence to her side, and on reflex she caught it. Glancing at the scroll briefly, she lifted up her shirt to the side to see why she had felt strange. She caught the complicated seal right before it faded back into her skin, unseen again. Shit hit, you sneaky bastard! I didn't even notice you put that on me. She smirked to herself when she had written that he would find a way. She hadn't expected it so soon. Her summon had only returned yesterday to tell her the message was received by a spiky blonde-haired kid she had described it. She looked down at the scroll again and giggled uncharacteristically. She couldn't help being excited at the first word from her boyfriend in 10 months. She was curious as to what he had been up to. The training trip had sounded interesting before he even left, and Tagiya had to admit she was a little jealous. Without more delay, she rushed over to a nearby raised platform and laid the scroll out, pulling a candle over for better light. Dear Tahiya-chan, I'm glad you finally wrote. I was getting worried that something had happened on your mission. Not that I didn't think you would do well, but I care about you, and I can't help but worry. You're right about the time feeling much longer than it is, but I think your photos will help me keep going. Thanks for those, by the way. They caused a lot of trouble when I unsealed them. I guess I should answer your questions first. Yeah, you're right. It's weird that you're practically working for Akatsuki. I know it's all undercover, but it's still strange to think about. I'm glad you're doing so well, and happy that you're causing trouble for Akatsuki. That always helps. The Falcon summon was cool, but I swear it was trying to gouge my eyes out when it delivered your letter. I guess I should fill you in on what happened so far. When I left Suna, I went to Takakakri. There I met another Jinchuriki. Fu, she's younger than us, 12 now. 12 now that her birthday's gone by, and she took to me well. She's like a little sister now, and I can't wait for you to meet her. You'll love her as much as I do. I know it. After that, we both went to Kumo and made even more friends. I met the Rakage. He's huge. There's B-sensei. He raps a lot, but he's a good teacher and helped me with my lightning affinity. And controlling QB's chakra. Oh, that's another thing. QB has a name, Kurama. How strange was it that I didn't know that? Next to Jujutsu, she helped Fu with her own training, and we became friends as well. Both of them are Jinchuriki too. I never thought I would meet so many. There's also Samui, Omui, and Karui. They're fun to hang out with, but really good shinobi as well. Kumo's a lot different from home, but it's got its good parts. I miss you and the familiar desert though. I'm not sure what else to write because I want to tell the rest to you personally. I really hope my reserves Suijin no Iki worked, otherwise all this writing will have been for nothing. I guess I'll find out in your next letter. Can't wait. The one and only Naruto Uzumaki. Taiya grinned at the letter. It was good to hear from Naruto again, even if it was just in letter form. She noticed the same seal pressed tightly into the bottom of the scroll and quickly flashed her chakra through it. She was a little disappointed when only a single photo emerged. She had hoped for something more like what she sent him, but she figured it wasn't really Naruto's style. She peered at the photo in the dim candlelight and smiled softly when she realized it was a group shot. She could plainly see Naruto in the middle, flanked by a load of people Taiya had never seen before. She was surprised at how much Naruto had grown in the brief time he was away. His face seemed thinner and more defined, and the spikes in his hair were longer, as were his usual bangs. In front of him was a younger girl Taiya immediately figured was Fu. She smiled at the warm way Naruto held her shoulders, both smiling into the camera. Behind him was the only person she could think of to be Naruto-sensei. She marveled for a few moments at how large the man was, as well as how powerful he seemed to be, even in 2D. To his right was a girl Toyo took a shot at as Yujito and immediately scowled at how close the girl was to Naruto. She trusted her blonde boyfriend, but she wasn't really experienced at controlling jealousy and felt a wave of possessiveness. She scowled even deeper when she looked at Naruto's right and saw the blonde-haired girl between her and her two teammates. She didn't even know if it was Samui or Kaori, but she didn't like her. She sulked as she looked down at her own chest. While it wasn't anything to be ashamed of, it wasn't near the blonde girl's impressive bust. Other than that, though, she had to feel happy that Naruto had made some friends, and even a sister in his time away. From the sounds of it, he was also getting stronger, and she hoped to pit herself against him when they next met. She was pulled from her thoughts as something fluttered down from the group photo, a single smaller Polaroid, which she quickly caught. Flipping it over, she grinned at what she saw. That's more like it, Naruto. I'll admit the orange looks good on the swimming trunks. Her sensitive ears picked up on the sounds of somebody entering the bunker, and she quickly threw both photos and the scroll into her duffel bag over in the corner. She turned back just as the lanky, dark-haired informant ducked into her room. It's about time you showed up. Like Master Sasori, I hate being kept waiting. Now I understand I was called here because you had some information on the civil war in Kirikakure. So where are you guys going to go? Naruto stood at the gates of Kumo next to Fu as they looked at the friends they had made. It was Yuto who asked the question, and even Fu seemed interested as she turned her head. Naruto just rubbed the back of his head and looked at the sky, one cloud in particular catching his attention as it lazily drifted along. I don't know really. I guess I had a lot of time to think about it. I think I'm going to go down to Wave Country. Everyone assembled looked at him curiously, and it was Kari who voiced their shared thoughts. Why the hell would you go there? They don't even have a shinobi village. What could you possibly hope to learn? Naruto shrugged absently, which riled up the dark-skinned redhead. He had gotten slightly laid back during his time in Kumo. His reflexes and alertness were still as sharp as ever, but his attitude as a whole had really calmed down, mostly thanks to Yuto's intervention. In all, he had rather mellowed out from the hyperactive boy he had been a few years ago. I had a mission there once to observe a Konoha getting team. They were protecting some bridge builder from the local tyrant. He had the entire island under his thumb, and the people were pretty destitute, living out of what could barely be called houses. On that mission, we killed the tyrant because he would have killed the team we were observing otherwise. I want to go and see how the place was doing, as well as pay my respects to someone I met there. Everyone nodded to his answer. It wasn't training, but a personal reason. After that, I don't know. Konoha's pretty close to Wave, so I guess I could drop in with Tsunade, see what's happening. Fu seemed excited by that. She had read a lot in Kumo and was excited to be visiting the greatest of the shinobi villages, even if Naruto didn't seem entirely comfortable with the idea himself. He knew that personal feelings had to be put aside, though, so that he could further his training. It would also be pretty good to drop in on Anko and Hana after a year, see if they still even remember him. He chuckled to himself. He figured he had made a pretty deep impression. They waved their goodbyes as Fu hugged each and every one of them, even earning the smallest of smiles from the stoic Samui. Pretty soon they were away from Kumo, heading back towards the coldness of the land of frost. That was the only way out of Lightning Country to the south. He wasn't exactly looking forward to another trek through the snow, but he gritted his teeth and walked anyway. He stopped at the edge of a forest and turned to Fu in a grin. Are you ready? The girl nodded excitedly, and he just smiled before both of them leaped into the trees. At least this time their journey would be shorter. Naruto smiled as he looked out over the bridge. He remembered it being big from his last visit, but this just reaffirmed it. He felt proud to have seen so many national monuments in his short time. The Hokage Monument, Suna's walls, Kumo's tower, Taki's tree, and now this. When they had left, it had still been incomplete, but now it stood in all its glory for the world to see. The Subarashi Suna no Roppu Bridge. It's kind of fitting, I guess. Fu didn't know what Naruto was talking about. She was too busy gawking at the immense piece of masonry before her. It's so big! Naruto just chuckled and ruffled Fu's hair, making her grumble before they walked down onto the bridge itself. Naruto was happy to see various stalls set up along its length, with various vendors peddling their goods to passerbys. They seemed to be doing well, which made Naruto feel happy. He could have helped. They seemed to be doing well, helped in this. Technically, it was Gaara who killed Gato, but Naruto would have done it in a heartbeat if his friend hadn't beaten him to it. Further into the nation, they could tell that Naruto's earlier assessments were correct, and Wave was possibly blooming with businesses. People roamed the streets with smiles on their faces and fear out of their hearts. Their oppression had been lifted, and children were happily running through the streets as opposed to being forced to beg at their sides. Naruto still remembered that little girl Agiha, who was begging for food when they had arrived in Wave. He had given her his rations for the next few weeks, knowing that he could always hunt for more food. He idly wondered what had become of her, if she was among these playing kids, enjoying her youth, or was he too late? He shook his head of the thoughts. He knew as a shinobi he couldn't save everyone, but he could always try his best, and that was what was important. He smiled at Fu, who just looked at him oddly, wondering what her older brother was thinking about as they moved through the seaside town. Come on, we should go find an inn or something to get rooms for the night. Fu nodded her head in agreement, but her stomach growled out its disapproval. They hadn't eaten since lunch, and even Naruto was feeling his stomach ache. Right, after we get something to eat. Fu nodded more graciously this time, as Naruto led her to the port. There were always a few restaurants around there for the sailors. Naruto checked out the potential restaurants, trying to find something that caught his eye. Fu, on the other hand, was distracted. She was intently watching a single dragonfly as it zipped around her head hypnotically. She had a smile on her face as she merely observed the nimble insect, finding a calmness through its seemingly erratic movements. When it zipped off, it just returned before zipping off in the same direction. It actually repeated this a few times, and Fu watched, fascinated as the insect seemed to want her to follow it. Temporarily forgetting about Naruto, she lazily followed the insect. She was still alert and wouldn't stay too far from Naruto, but something about the dragonfly caught her attention. She followed it along the pier a bit until it stopped above a simple, unassuming boat. It hovered above its metal deck, just zipping to and fro, but never leaving its confines. By now, Fu was possibly enraptured by its seemingly thought out of movements. They looked so precise and agile. With a single hop, she was up on the deck of the ship, her feet making the barest of clangs against the weather-beaten metal. Before she could reach out and try to ensnare the fast insect, she felt a strong hand on her shoulder. She looked around quite suddenly to see Naruto staring at her with a stern expression. She immediately looked down guiltily. She had run away from him, and he must have been worried and come to find her. Fu, what do you say? Naruto couldn't get any further. He had let down his guard in Fu's absence, caution replaced by panic, and now he was paying for it. Without any drama, he felt something strike the back of his head before his vision went funny and he blacked out. End of chapter 36.